This is something interesting that's going to affect all of us. A couple of weeks ago, Fred Meyer announced a plan to try to crack down on crime and shoplifting at its Portland area stores. Part of that plan is to have staff check your receipt as you leave. Here's Fred Meyer President Todd Meyer.
It may not look identical to a Costco style, but we will employ measures where we will check receipts as customers leave the store.
Well, that news generated a lot of feedback from you all, and much of it was in support of that crackdown. But there was some skepticism about the receipt checking policy, with people wondering, can they really do that? And if you don't want to hand over your receipt at the door, can you just say no? Fred Meyer is not the first big grocery retailer to start checking receipts, so these questions have come up before. And some people on the internet seem pretty confident that they have the answers. If you search through TikTok, for example, you can find a lot of videos of people filming themselves in stores simply refusing to have their receipts checked on the way out. They say they have no legal obligation to show their receipts to staff. Meyer mentioned Costco, which is probably the best known stickler for receipt checking. But the thing that sets Costco apart is that you have to be a member just to walk in through the front door. That means you've already signed a membership agreement that clearly spells it out. Your receipt and your cart will be checked every time you leave. The controversy over receipt checking tends to be focused on retailers that do not require membership, where you're free to just walk in at any time. Stores like Walmart and now Fred Meyer. We emailed Fred Meyer to ask how their policy will work, and they said the checks will be handled by third-party security guards, but then they didn't answer questions about what happens if a customer says no. So we asked two Portland area attorneys to get their takes. Michael Fuller at the Underdog Law Office and Greg Kafoury with Kafoury and McDougall. On the first question, is Fred Meyer allowed to check receipts at the door? The answer is yes, or at least yes, they can ask you. But the policy cannot be used in a discriminatory way.
So generally, stores can have loss prevention policies, and those policies can generally include checking receipts. And so stores are also subject to Oregon's public accommodation laws, so they can't target particular groups with their receipt checking policies, and they can't discriminate. We've sued Fred Meyer's in the past for checking receipts of customers based on race. It's something that can happen either intentionally or through implicit bias. So that's always something we want to be cautious of. But I think it's great that they're, exploring different ways to keep customers safe.
Kafoury, for his part, said he's also sued Fred Meyer for receipt checking discrimination in the past, and he noted that it's not enough for a store to have a non-discriminatory policy on paper. If an employee at the door does not get the memo, the store is still in trouble.
The actual practice of their people on the ground has to be within the law. And once you start stopping people, you're sticking your neck out.
But still, technically, they can ask. But what about the other question? What happens if someone says no? What is the store legally allowed to do? Well, Oregon law does not mention receipt checking, but it does mention shoplifting, and it gives stores the ability to detain a person in a reasonable manner and for a reasonable time if they have probable cause to suspect the person of shoplifting. Now, many states have similar laws, sometimes called shopkeepers' privilege laws, and one of them factored into a recent court case about receipt checking in Colorado. According to Business Insider, a man sued Walmart for false imprisonment after he was detained in a Denver area store when he refused to show his receipt at the exit. But the court found that Walmart was not liable due to the state's shopkeepers' privilege law. But before you read too much into that headline, there is some important context here. According to Business Insider, the court case showed that the man had gone to multiple Walmart stores and purchased merchandise, but then walked out with the items not in bags and his receipt not visible. Basically, he was trying to make himself look like a shoplifter in order to provoke the stores to detain him. That means the staff had reason to be suspicious even before he refused to show his receipt. But what if you refuse to show your receipt and there's nothing else suspicious about you? Well, in that case, the store does not have probable cause, and you should be free to go. Here's what Kafoury told us.
Probable cause means that they are aware of facts which make a reasonable person believe that the customer is engaged in theft. And saying, I don't want to produce a receipt, I want to go home now, is nowhere near probable cause.
In fact, according to Kafori, just asking to see receipts could kind of become a problem. Because if customers don't realize that they're free to go, then even the request to see the receipt might come across as a form of being detained.
If you're stopped at a store by someone who appears to be an authority and demands that you produce a receipt, it is reasonable to assume that if you don't produce a receipt, you're going to have trouble. You're not going to be allowed to leave. And if somebody reasonably believes that, they've been unlawfully detained, and that store is subject to civil litigation and to damages.
So not as straightforward as you might have thought. It's already pretty rare for stores to detain customers, even in cases of outright shoplifting, and there are good reasons to expect that the same probably goes for receipt renegades.
It'd be pretty risky legally to put your hands on a customer or to physically, physically detain them inside the store. And God forbid you're wrong, or they have a disability, or they're injured in the process, or they attack your employee and now your employee has a claim against you for workers' compensation. I mean, there's just all sorts of things can go wrong when stores put their hands on their customers.
But here's what else Fuller, the lawyer there, had to say. Stores may not like to detain people, but they do have other methods to deter shoplifters. They can do things like escort people out of the store or restrict their access if they try to come back. And they could try those approaches for receipt cases.
So I can't imagine that Fred Meyer's policy would be to detain anyone who refused to comply with the receipt checking policy. They could simply trespass them out of their neighborhood store, though, which would probably ensure compliance for most shoppers. So I think the people online may be right in that they don't have to comply with the request, but they may not be shopping at that store much longer.
So there is a tool there. What do you think about all this? Does receipt checking feel like an imposition or just not really that big a deal? Drop us an email, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a message. The phone number 503-226-5090.